Really an interesting one for those who are really interested in reparations, particularly reparations within an African context. California has put a price on what it might be to pay people for the injustice that they experienced due to slavery. How they've put a price on it, this is really interesting as an economist, how people put price on things like this. I'm going to try and make a video about that because it's really interesting how people put a price on things like human life, the environment, and all that sort of stuff. Those are interesting topics and sometimes quite controversial. What this committee or group have found is that they've come up with a number, and that number is that they would need to pay $1.2 million per person for the injustice of slavery. For you, it might be a big number, a small number, given the impacts over generations that have happened, but it's a really big step in that America is moving forward in terms of trying to sort of rectify this issue about compensating people for the injustice that they've experienced. Even though it's not them that have directly been affected by slavery, but because of what happened to the ancestors, they're affected till today. Of course, there's going to be questions about how do you identify those who have been affected by slavery and how would they even get this money. So it's $1.2 million per person, and they estimate that it'll cost about $800 billion to compensate all those who were affected by slavery within the state of California. So there's not broader America, but it's sort of starting a conversation about how much do people deserve to be compensated for the effects of slavery and other racial discriminatory laws and policies that have been enacted in the past. Backstory is that it got started because of this commission was commissioned after the murder of George Floyd in 2020. So it's only taken 2 years for this to kind of turn around, which is quite fast if you think about it, because this has been something that has been talked about and mentioned many, many times, but no one has really done really much, and there hasn't been any movement from what I know is that this is probably the most major work that is done at actually putting a number on what it would mean to compensate people for the impacts of slavery. So it will be interesting to see what happens, because there's a bit of support from African Americans, of course, but there's not so much support from quite a few groups. For example, the white people who support reparations is still quite low from those who are white. Even the Hispanic and the Asians don't have much support for it. Those who are Republican really don't support doing reparations, whereas those who are Democrat is kind of half enough. As we know, Zimbabwe is also exploring this topic of reparations, as are many other African countries and many other Pan-African people, about colonization, that Africans should be compensated for the injustice of colonization. And this could be a blueprint for many people for other countries to look at and see it as a way of calculating how much should colonizers pay Africans for the injustice of colonization. Whether we actually get paid for it is another question, because it needs political power to do that, and also there needs to be a strong united voice not just from Africans but from European and Western allies from countries that did impose colonization on Africa, for this to even become a reality of Africans being paid for the impacts of colonization on their ancestors and on themselves, if they're still alive today, those who have been directly impacted by colonization, and the impacts of future generations so far. So I think this will be an interesting space to keep looking at. I think some people there might be some people who take this on and sort of build a model and come up with a number for how much each African should be paid for colonization within the context of that African country. Like South Africa's number would be different from Zimbabwe's, and that would be different from Nigeria's, and that would be different from all the other different African countries that experience colonization. This is an interesting one. This is a one that has really captured my imagination about how they've calculated this, and I'll be looking into this more and watching this space to see what happens.